this video, we're going to look at the types of demons. This is part 4 in our series on spiritual warfare. Now, demons are created spiritual entities. While they're invisible, it appears that they have the ability to appear to the human eye and have a profound effect on human history and the lives of the people on earth. There are a number of things that we know about them, but also a number of things that we do not know. Scripture, for the most part, concentrates more on two main things about demons: their effect on humans and how to deal with them. Other information about them appears to be very limited. Because Scripture focuses on their effect and dealing with them, this is what we will focus on as well. We will, however, make an attempt to give some details about their origins. Remember, though, the most important thing about the demonic is their effect on us and how to deal with that effect on us and others. Now, there appear to be 3 different types of demons, each having their own set of abilities and domains in which to operate. There does appear to be a power structure, an organization to their working, and some definitely have more power than others. Demons are not omnipresent. In other words, they can't be everywhere at once. So Satan cannot influence multiple people at the same time. As a result, the kingdom of Satan needs to work together in order to maintain the influence that they desire. Now, the very first kind of demon is the fallen angels. These are the most powerful category of the general category of demons. They appear to have established their own authority structure in defiance of God's rule. The truth is that we have no idea how many of these fallen angels there are, but Revelations 12 verse 4 indicates that 1/3 of the angels that existed in heaven, that were once good angels, may have followed Satan in rebellion against God. Revelations chapter 12 verses 3 to 4 says that another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his head. His tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that he might devour her child the moment that it was born. Jesus also stated to Peter that if he wanted to, he could call into action more than 12 legions of angels to assist him. This is found in Matthew chapter 26, verse 53. Now, a legion at that time, like a legion of Romans, was a little over 5,000 men. What this is all meaning is that it's likely that there are about 6 legions or 30,000 fallen angels. There are too many ways of looking at Scripture, though, to say that this is an accurate number or even remotely correct. But for those of you who like numbers or enjoy a good debate, it at least gives you something to argue about with your friends. I prefer to say that there are enough to establish a fairly good power structure over the earth. Now, it would appear that the fallen angels are the demons who are in charge. They appear to have more power and authority than other demons, and Satan is referred to as the prince of this world, so we can assume that he's probably in charge. John chapter 12 verse 31, John chapter 14 verse 30, and John chapter 16 verse 11 all refer to Satan in this way. These are also probably what I would refer to as the territorial demons, who are in control of large areas of the earth geographically. In Daniel chapter 10 verses 12 to 13, we read a story about Daniel who had been praying, and the angel Gabriel comes to him and tells him the following: "Don't be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me for 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, because I was detained there with the king of Persia." This seems to be talking about a demonic territorial spirit that was over Persia that resisted Daniel receiving information from God. These fallen angels don't seem to require a host, although they do have the ability to inhabit humans. For example, Judas Iscariot is possessed by Satan. The second kind of spirit is what I refer to as disembodied spirits or Nephilim. These appear to be a race of people, come from a race of people who are the offspring of human women and angelic spirits. When these people die, it appears that there's something unusual about what happens with regards to their spirit. It appears that they can continue to live on the earth through another host, or maybe even without a host. We see glimpses of this in Genesis chapter 6, verses 3 to 5. Prior to the flood, where it talks about the sons of God, which is generally used to describe angels in Scripture, cohabiting with human women. Genesis chapter 6, verses 4 to 6 says that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. And the Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. Now, what's interesting is that immediately after this description of activity that these angels had with human women, God pronounces judgment on the earth and states categorically that for most people, all they ever thought about was evil. Many years after the flood, we actually hear about the Nephilim again in Numbers chapter 13. Numbers 13, verses 32 to 33 says this, in speaking about the Israelite spies who came back after being commanded by Moses to spy out the land. They came back, and it says that they spread a bad report among the Israelites about the land they had explored. And they said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw are of great size. And we saw the Nephilim there." The descendants of Anak came from the Nephilim. "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." Now the question is, how could there be descendants of the Nephilim after the flood? Didn't all of mankind, including the Nephilim, die in the flood, except for Noah and his family? If the spirits of the Nephilim were different, however, than our human spirits, it's possible that they could remain on the earth as spirits following the death of their fleshly bodies. These unclean spirits would desire to re-inhabit a fleshly body. When this occurred generation after generation, it's possible that the people to whom this occurred became enough like the original Nephilim that they were referred to as those who came from the Nephilim. It appears that after the flood, these Nephilim became like disembodied spirits that didn't have the ability to return to God like our human spirits do. And they were not angelic spirits. But they did have an ability to inhabit physical bodies. We refer to these Nephilim as demons. It makes sense that the offspring of fallen angels and human women would result in something a little bit different than an angel and a human. It also makes sense that they would choose to serve the prince of darkness and use sin, especially sin of the flesh, as their entry point and stronghold into a person's life. Some theologians have even speculated that Satan became aware of portions of God's plan to bring redemption to humans, and had a plan to overcome the human race with a hybrid, fallen angel human race that would become dominant on the earth. This speculation goes on further to say that this plan failed when these hybrids were destroyed in the flood, and the original fallen angels propagating this new species of hybrid were bound in chains. 2 Peter chapter 2 verses 4 to 5 says, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them into gloomy dungeons to be held for judgment, if he didn't spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others." And then he goes on to say, how much more should we understand that God will bring judgment on people? But you'll notice he talks about there's a judgment that occurred on these angels that abandoned their original posts. Now, whether this is the correct interpretation of these passages of Scripture or not, what is clear is that somehow the spirits of these Nephilim survived after the flood and gave their hosts unusual strength and ability. Now, the third category of demon that we want to talk about, I'm just going to refer to as unclean spirits. Now, this could also be used as a general term for any kind of demon, fallen angel, Nephilim. But many people believe that there is a third classification of spirits that is of a different nature from Nephilim or fallen angels, and has more to do with human spirits that experience some form of demonic trauma or demonic sorcery at the time of death of the human. We see a possible instance of this happening in the Bible, though it's not really clear that this is what's actually happened. Nonetheless, in 2 Kings chapter 3, verses 26 to 27, it says, "When the king of Moab saw that the battle had gone against him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through to the king of Edom. But this failed. So he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him as king, and offered him as a sacrifice on the city wall. And the fury against Israel was great. They withdrew and returned to their own land." So here we have a battle against a king. The Israelites were fighting this king. And this king clearly performs an occultic demonic sacrifice intended to produce power against the people of God attempting to overthrow him. Immediately after this sacrifice, the victory that seemed to be assured to Israel is strangely confounded, and the entire army is forced to withdraw. This may well have been due to the creation of a new demonic spirit through the use of the pagan demonic ritual of sacrificing a child, which came against the army with great rage and force at this time. Many Jewish historians, such as Josephus, held to a similar view that some demons were the spirits of wicked men. But because there's not a lot of biblical evidence for this idea, I'm not going to try and spend any more time defending or promoting it. If there is some truth to this idea, however, it may explain why there seems to be an element of child sacrifice in some of the more extreme satanic groups. Now again, this is just speculation. The truth is that the origin of demons is not nearly as important as getting rid of them and the fact that they do exist. This is probably why God does not give us any clear, undeniable information on their origins. So we shouldn't spend a lot of time obsessing about this either. Now, one area that we do want to look at before we close is the area of demonic government. While we do not know everything that there is to know about the origin of demons, what we do know is that they appear to be organized. Jesus himself says this about Satan's kingdom. In Mark chapter 3, verses 23 to 26, he says to them, "How can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan opposes himself and is divided, he cannot stand. His end has come." Jesus was, of course, defending himself before the Pharisees, who accused him of actually casting out demons by the power of Satan. But what this shows us is that this means that Satan rules a unified kingdom, which has worked well together for thousands of years. They do well together probably because their survival depends on it, and they have nowhere else to turn. Jesus redeemed humans, not demons, and there's no indication that once an angel has sinned, there's any kind of redemption available for them. Now, Ephesians 6:12, a verse that we've looked at already, gives us a brief overview of that government hierarchy. It says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." So what we see at the top, first of all, are the rulers, also referred to as principalities, or in the original language, the archi. This would be similar in rank to an archangel, 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and Jude 1:9, in terms of being absolutely in charge. These archi are absolutely in charge. Likely these are fallen angels that were once real archangels. Now, next in line are the authorities, or in the King James Version referred to as powers, or in the Greek they're the exousia. These ones seem to also be fallen angels, but more like the ones who exert power and authority and are more intimately involved in promoting evil, but on a broader scale, like a territory or possibly even a geographical area. The world powers of this darkness, or rulers in the King James Version, also in the Greek the cosmocrator, seem to refer to those that exert power at a higher level than just a demon that is attacking an individual. Such a demon is a world power. This may be a reference to a more powerful demon, such as the Nephilim, or a fallen angel of less power. And then the final type mentioned is a spiritual force of evil, or a force of spiritual wickedness in the King James, also referred to as pneumatikos poneria in the Greek. These are likely the foot soldiers of the demonic world, many of whom are disembodied spirits working in conjunction with their demonic leaders to bring the world under satanic control. Now again, all of this is just theory. We're given very little information about how the demonic power structure actually works. And the truth is that there's very little practical use for this knowledge, which is the reason I believe that the Bible doesn't bother to give us much information about these things. What we really want to look at is what demons are capable of and how we can defeat them.